Hello everyone and welcome to my first video review here for the channel on UGNN. This is Matthew. I'm the chief editor of the site, and before I start, I'd just like to say that I'm hoping to try and get a bit more video content done for the site. It's been a long time coming, but hopefully I can do well considering I'm pretty damn bad with video editing technology. So what I've got today is our first video review, like I said, and today we're going to be covering God of War 2018. So a little bit of insight for those who obviously aren't aware yet. I mean, to be fair, most people probably are, but you've got to cover for the few. God of War 2018 basically is a reboot of the iconic Sony PlayStation 2 era series, in which we follow Kratos, also known as the Ghost of Sparta. Um, with this game, though, it's sort of like a soft reboot of the series, but it's also a fourth entry in the actual games as well. So, basically, I'm just going to tell you the quick layout of how I normally do these reviews. Usually, I do the story, the gameplay, the sound, the visuals, and ultimately my final thoughts. So, without further ado, I think we should continue straight away. So to start off, I'll start talking about the story. So, for me, I absolutely adored God of War's story. It was unlike anything that I've played in the series previously, and for many reasons as well. It's just one of the best stories I've played in probably in a few years. It's probably up there with the sort of stories that you expect with like The Last of Us or Uncharted, for example. It's sort of like Naughty Dog's type of storytelling. Um, with this game, we see Kratos, who, after the events of God of War 3, has. Oh, I should also put in point there is may also be some spoilers ahead, so just kind of tune out or you know do whatever. It's up to you. I'm just putting the spoiler warning out there. There could be spoilers. So with this entry, we see Kratos, who after the events of God of War 3 is older, he's much more wiser, and he's wandered pretty much the earth alone for probably a few decades. And so when we come to see Kratos in this game, he's restarted his life in Scandinavia, sort of like a second chance. And at the start of the game, we see him holding a funeral for his new wife, who is called Fear. Basically, leaving behind as well. Le- ins- sorry, leaving Kratos behind. She also leaves her son behind, called Atreus, who basically Kratos then has to raise this child to learn to survive. Teach him how to become strong enough so that if anyone tries to attack him, then he can defend himself. Um, but as Kratos, does the funeral, basically gets the ashes of his wife, he's randomly attacked by a mysterious tattooed man who I can only assume was modeled off Conor McGregor. Um, I'll talk more about that in the visuals. But basically, you find out that this man is the god Balder. Now, Balder wants to take out Kratos and Atreus for many different reasons, but the main reason he was there was purely for Kratos' wife. Which, as the story continues, you find out more. I'm not going to say anything else more about that, basically, the attack urges Kratos to then move forward with his plan to scatter his wife's ashes at the top of the highest mountain. Um, this leads to a journey where Kratos and Atreus both head out and learn to sort of come to terms with each other as well. Because, and I'm just going to start talking randomly now, because this is just what I do. Um, so what I liked about it was it showed that Kratos and Atreus have a lot of underlying issues that they need to cover. I mean, one of the biggest things in the game is that Atreus actually doesn't know about Kratos' past, which I loved. I loved the idea that he's had a son, he's trying to have a fresh start, and he doesn't want his son to know anything about the past. But ultimately, the way they did it was that Kratos hiding the past from his son is what is making his son incredibly ill. Um, I like the whole idea that Atreus doesn't think that Kratos doesn't love him because obviously he thinks that Kratos is pretty much incapable of love, mainly because of the fact that he hasn't shown any emotion over the death of his wife. But obviously, as we all know, Kratos is one of those bottled up emotion types, and so he does grieve, but he grieves sort of in his own way. Now, interestingly enough, I think for me, I think the thing that struck a chord was the fact that God of War to me struck a very personal chord. Um, I think purely because I've been through a similar sort of situation in the past year, um, with my own father, and it's very interesting to sort of play out the same sort of situation in a video game and to sort of realize that what I'm doing in this game as Kratos is kind of the way that my dad saw things as well in like my situation. So I really like the fact that to me it also had a very personal feel as well. Um I liked how the story as well was very simplistic, very much like The Last of Us, where The Last of Us was pretty much you've got a girl who you need to get across America, and that's it. And basically, I think the big key thing. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Sorry about that. The audio basically froze on my laptop. Basically, though, what I liked about The Last of Us was that it was a very intimate story. Basically, it wasn't about the actual story. I mean, you had a set destination and everything, but ultimately it was about the character development and the bond that grew between Joel and Ellie. And I think that's really what Sony Santa Monica has decided to do with this story in keeping Kratos and Atreus and learning more about each other as well as the player learning more about how much Kratos has grown and who Atreus really is. And I think the twist that was put in at the end as to who Atreus really is was just phenomenal. I wasn't expecting it, and I loved every single second of it. Um, so I think I should move on to the gameplay now, and there is a lot of spoilers here. Um, so you have been warned. So I think with the gameplay in God of War, I really liked it. I mean, obviously, I'm honestly not sure if I prefer this new style or if I prefer the original hack and slash type style of the original God of Wars. And I'd probably say this one has the edge for me because I like how you have to think tactically. You can't just run straight in, you know, just like the beast that Kratos was, and just run in and start like hacking people's guts out and stuff. You have to actually think about how you're going to attack. You have to think about aiming for weak points. You have to dodge, And I think in many ways, and I was actually discussing this with a fellow editor on the site, but um, it also kind of almost reminds me a little bit of Dark Souls in uh in the gameplay style of Dark Souls. Now, I'm not a big fan of Dark Souls, if I'm being honest. Mainly because I'm not good at it. I will openly admit I love the world. I like the idea of the world. I like the music, but I can't play the games. Um, but I feel like God of War was almost like an easier version of Dark Souls. Um, I liked that you had basically two primary weapons in the game. Now, this is where the spoilers are really going to come into play. Um, so obviously you start out with your primary weapon, which is the Leviathan axe. Um, this axe is amazing. It's honestly, it's one of the coolest weapons that I've ever used in a game. I like the fact that you can upgrade all your weapons as you play the game. So it's kind of got elements of a RPG, sort of like an action RPG, where you can attach different runes to your weapons, so you can do special attacks. You can increase the damage. You can increase the vitality that you get from it, cooldown rates, critical hit chances. And I liked that you really had to, you had to keep checking your inventory, upgrading your inventory in order to make Kratos better, because ultimately you can't stand a chance in this game unless you actually upgrade and basically grow as the game continues. So what I really did like was how powerful the Leviathan axe is. I mean, obviously you can throw it and get it to come back to you, sort of similar to Mjolnir from like Thor's Mjolnir, which is pretty funny considering obviously it's set in the same sort of world as Thor this time around. Um, but what I liked was the fact that the Leviathan axe does damage when it's returned as well. So like you could throw it at an enemy and it would do a lot of damage, like really big damage. And then you can recall it, and as you recall it, the axe will actually come backwards and hit the enemy as well, which to me was so helpful when you got to points where enemies were just kind of swarming you from all sides. Um, this is my big problem with the Leviathan axe, however. Um, about halfway through the game, you get a second weapon, which many God of War fans will know as the Blades of Chaos. And for me, I think as soon as the Blades of Chaos really come into the mix, you kind of lose any real interest in using the Leviathan axe. And I think it's a real shame considering the Leviathan axe to me was such a cool weapon to use. Um, I just want to say this now as well. The Blades of Chaos, God of War, wow, they just they play so good. See, when I saw the gameplay style they were going with for this new God of War, I was genuinely worried. I had no idea how they would do something like the Blades of Chaos. In fact, I thought it was pretty much impossible. And when you play this game and you play with the Blades of Chaos, it feels so good. Like it feels incredible. The speed, the velocity, um, just how much like range you can get with an attack with the Blades of Chaos is phenomenal. And I liked how with this game as well, you also had to really switch between your weapons to solve puzzles. So you'd have points where you'd have to throw the axe to move like a spike trap, or you'd have to, use the Blades of Chaos to, cut down frozen frozen barbs that may like prevent you from going any further. And I really liked how much puzzle solving there was in this game because there was quite a bit of it. I'd probably say more than any of the other God of War games, to be fair. Um, what else can I really talk about with the gameplay? There's plenty of collectibles. I liked how they scattered the collectibles in each sort of section of the map, like because then it gives you the whole idea of exploring this huge world to fully get everything. And I just want to say I love that they took God of War open world. I mean, it's not a well, I mean it is a big open world, but it's not like truly open world. It's kind of like a sandboxy type open world. But it works so well for this series. I mean, I like I like the idea you could row the boat and you could just sail through the entire like sail through the big part of Midgard's map and you just hear stories like I mean, I remember one of my favorite stories in the game was Kratos trying to tell the story of the tortoise and the hare. And that Hey God, I mean, it was so funny. It was really funny just him trying to explain this story. And then Atreus just sort of kind of like, you don't tell many stories, do you? Uh, I just I loved it. I loved the the sort of the comedic banter between the two. Um I liked how they explored the other realms as well, which is a very big part of Norse mythology. Obviously, there's 9 realms in Norse mythology, and this game you're pretty much allowed to visit nearly all of them. I think the only ones you really can't visit is the likes of Asgard and there's Asgard and there's a few other ones I can't remember. I know you can visit Midgard, Alfheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim, Jotunheim, and Helheim. I'm not 100% certain on what the other ones were. Um, if you know, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Um, but yeah, so I think that was something I really liked about the gameplay, the fact that they really took an open world and they meant it. I mean, they didn't just do one open world essentially. They did like about 4, which was really really cool to play in. Um, I will admit one of my big issues with the game was that in terms of the enemies, I think there was loads of different types of enemies as I played through the game, but I think when you compare it to the original God of War trilogy and you see the different enemies that were in the game, like there was loads of different variety in what type of enemies you faced. Different enemies had different special abilities and such and such. Whereas in this one, most of the enemies seem to just sort of be like reskins and they sort of have their own different gameplay. Like they have their own different like attacks, but like mostly they're just the same, just with a different color scheme. And I think when you consider how unique the enemies were in God of War, I think it is a bit of a shame. So I will be marking it down a little bit for that. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, it's pretty much been spot on. I mean, I haven't really encountered any glitches in there. At least not that I know of personally. Um, but yeah, I mean, other than that, though, I mean, I think I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to cover in terms of gameplay. Um, so I'll move on to the music. Now, I will be honest here and say that I did like the music. I really did like the music in this game, but it just wasn't as iconic as obviously the music from the original trilogy. I mean, obviously you have, the original God of War games, you have a lot of rock, you have, very heavy epic tunes, and whereas I think with this one, I think the music really does suit the story that they're telling, but unfortunately it's not as iconic because it's a lot more slower. It's a lot more, it's just at the right pace for the storytelling. It does have some incredible music. I mean, the end credits music that plays after the special cutscene, which kind of alludes to a second game. Not saying anything else on that, but it plays the music that was done with a live orchestra at E3 2016. And I really liked that. I thought it was really, really good use of the music. The music is composed by Bear McCreary, who is probably best known for his work doing the theme tune for The Walking Dead, the TV series, not the Telltale game. And it's very, very soft. It's melodic, and I do really like sort of the different ways that it kind of tells the story as well, like without words. So I think the other thing I can mention safely in the voice acting section though is, well, I mean, I meant to say the sound section, but the voice acting. Oh, this entire review is going balls up. But basically, let's just talk about the voice acting. I loved the voice acting in this game. I figured no one can do Kratos other than TC Carson. Well, Terrence Carson. And surprisingly, the new guy was really good. Um, I say the new guy because I'm just quickly looking up the actual voice actor. I swear I need to do more research in future. Um, let's have a look. Um, so Christopher Judge, obviously from Battlestar Galactica, has taken the mantle of Kratos this time round, and honestly, I think he did really, really good. Like I, I was very, very surprised at how he managed to portray an older Kratos, but still sort of keep in the same vein as the original Kratos. Um, that took me by surprise. He did a good job. I will give him that. He did a really, really good job. But unfortunately, you're not going to have anyone. Oh, sorry, I said Battlestar Galactica. I meant to say Stargate. Sorry, sci-fi nerds. Please do not sacrifice me. Um, but he did a good job considering he had such big shoes to fill. Um, then you've got Sonny Soljic who plays Atreus. Um, I really liked the way he played Atreus. I think he had just he had the right level of arrogance as well as the right level of, humanity and empathy. And I think when you're pitted up against a character like Kratos, like when you're paired with a character like Kratos, who obviously is the complete opposite, you have to really put a lot of emotion into that performance. And he did such a spot on job. I mean, obviously seeing Kratos ultimately, feeling sorry for him, trying to comfort him, you know, because of what he says, it's just such an interesting dynamic to see. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different voice actors in this game. There's Mimir, who is voiced by Alistair Duncan, who's been in many other different games such as Uncharted 3, Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus, The Order, Shadow of War. You've got Troy Baker voicing Magni, um, who, if any fans of Norse mythology know, is the son of Thor. Um, Magni, I mean, no, Troy Baker is also iconic for voicing Joel in The Last of Us. He's also voiced other characters such as Booker DeWitt, the Joker, etc., etc. While of while the man, the myth, the legend, Nolan North voices Modi as well, the other son of Thor. Obviously, Nolan North, no introduction, voices Nathan Drake in the Uncharted series. as well as Deadpool as well. There's been like loads of other different voice actors in the game who did fantastic bang up performances, but they were the standout ones personally for me. So let's move on to the visuals. I think God of War's visuals just when I first started playing the game, it looked stunning to me. I mean, playing on a 4K TV really does enhance the experience, so I will say that to people. If you do have a 4K TV, definitely rig your PlayStation 4 up and play God of War on it because it really does bring out the color perfectly. Um, Everything just looked amazing from, the water effects to, just even this individual hairs in Kratos' beard, you could see it perfectly. I like the redesign as well of Kratos. I think I should mention that here. Um, I like that they gave him, a big bushy sort of lumberjack beard because, I mean, if you're gonna redesign the character and make him older, why not just give him a lumberjack beard? Um, but I liked how you have Kratos as this broad, muscular guy. I mean, probably a bit more thicker than the previous entries. But then you also have Atreus, who is a complete contrast, and much like the voice acting as well, like and his personality, he is the complete opposite of Kratos, where he's small, he's scrawny, he's skinny. He's got like no muscle to him, and I really like that with the whole Kratos and Atreus dynamic that they've decided to go for complete opposites. Um, I thought once again I should mention that the enemy design was a bit flawed because obviously while there was different enemies and they did have different attacks, they were pretty much just reskins. Um, I will admit though, I did really, really like the enemy design on the Valkyries. The Valkyries are hidden bosses throughout God of War, where they're hidden within different areas known as Odin's temples. Odin basically locks them up in hidden temples, which you need to unlock later on in the game. Um, and the Valkyrie fights are a bitch. Like they are very, very hard. Um, well, until you get all the best gear and basically just wipe them out in 10 seconds, pretty much. Um, but the design on the Valkyries, I really liked that. They had the wings, they had the whole warrior angel type style to them, which, to be fair, the Valkyries in Norse mythology are pretty much described as warrior angels, so it was very, very fitting. Um, I liked the design of Jormungandr, who obviously is the world serpent. I liked. I did like the design on the elves as well, the dark elves who you see in Alfheim. Uh, that was such an interesting design for them to go with. It was kind of like it was reminiscent of Elder Scrolls, but at the same time, it kind of had elements of like Lord of the Rings and stuff in there. Um, Alfheim was beautiful. Alfheim was probably the most beautiful world in the game, in my opinion. Um, it's a cross between that and Midgard. I think the other worlds, while they seem like they'd be a bit accurate to how Norse mythology described them, I feel that because of that, it didn't really show the true beauty or style of these Norse worlds. Whereas Alfheim looked incredible, and Midgard obviously just looked phenomenal due to the nature. Um, I liked some of the designs of the locations as well, such as Freya's house, which obviously is under a gigantic turtle. Um, I loved pretty much nearly every aspect of the world. I loved the weapons, the way the weapons looked, the character redesigns. My biggest flaw was the enemies, pretty much. So we'll just move on to the final thoughts now. Ultimately, I'd say God of War is pretty much a masterpiece. There is very, very little faults that I have with this game. You know, I'd probably say, like I said, obviously the enemies is a big, big issue for me. Um, and the fact that the music isn't as iconic as the other games, because I really do feel that that was one of the big things that God of War had. The fact that it, would start out epic and it would have this whole epic soundtrack and everything. Whereas I will say as well, I didn't really think the opening was really epic, but I think that was in a good way because it kind of suited the story they were telling this time around. But I think other than those few little things, there honestly is no fault with this game. This is a perfect game in many senses. There's been no glitches. You know, you really need to think. It's a game that ultimately shows that the franchise has evolved with the player, and I can't recommend it enough. So with that in mind, I think the score that I'm going to give this game is a 9 out of 10. Um, like things that were good with it, as I've already said, the story was fantastic. The voice acting was really good. Not as good as, I mean, Kratos wasn't as good as the original trilogy, but to be fair, it was the voice that made Kratos. So, you know, you can't blame the guy. He did put up a good job. Um, Gameplay was phenomenal. I liked the fact that it made you think. I liked the how you only had two weapons, but you had to alternate between them to really get shit done. And I liked the fact that the visuals and the visual style of like the worlds was just phenomenal, especially Alfheim. Really, really loved Alfheim. Um, and there's plenty of replay value as well to this game, so that's a very, very good thing. Um, Bad things, as I said, the enemies are pretty much just reskins of each other, and the music isn't as iconic. And I think that is probably it. Um, God of War is available now on the PlayStation 4, so if you do own a PlayStation 4, I would highly recommend you go out and buy it if you haven't already. Um, I really hope you guys like this review. Sorry about many, many mistakes through the recording. Obviously, the dialogue's bit hit and miss, but that was purely due to laptop malfunctions. Um, but I'm hoping to do some more videos for the site, so please do stay tuned. Feel free to hit the subscribe, or don't. I'm not telling you what you have to do. But if you do want to stay in, like, if you do want to know whenever we post videos, you know, you can feel free to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification thing, and then that'll help you to know when we do our next video. I'm hoping to get something up within the next week or so. I'm hoping to start doing video news rather than typing it all up because that would save me a lot more time, and it's really going to help when E3 comes round in a few weeks' time. So, yeah, I hope you guys really liked this review, and feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me how I could improve. It's up to you guys. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.